This is a long one, so strap
It's all
in.
right. I'm strapped.
I'm sorry. What? I thought you were going to end it with I'm
You said
strapped in.
no, strapped.
Oh, she's strapped. Mm.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. I'm Blair.
And I'm Kirsten, and we are
Mediocre
content.
content.
Oh my god. You glitched. It was so delayed. I was like, and we started off on the best foot.
No, I did that on purpose.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah. That's about how the week has been. I totally did
Yes.
that on purpose. Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I did. It's true.
Everything going good. We're in another week of September.
Everything going good. Yes.
Yeah.
I decorated for Halloween. You cannot tell me it's not Halloween already. I have declared that it is so, and it
That's
will
fair.
be.
I mean, we're halfway through September, so I feel like it's fine.
We got Salem a cute little skeleton Halloween costume,
So cute.
and he loves it.
Is that sarcasm or for real?
No, he actually does. He like
Okay,
walked around the house and everything
cool.
with it. So
Very
it was
good.
good. It's like a little hoodie. And then
Ah,
he doesn't like the hood part, but he likes the the shirt part.
I'm very upset with you then because I got 0 pictures.
Oh, well, we can fix that. I'll send you some. I'll
Please
send you like
do.
1,000.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. Just blow up my phone.
I
Cat
took about 1,000, so you'll get about 1,000.
I'm so
Okay.
excited to see this cat. Wait, so you said it was Jinx or Salem?
It was Salem.
So Jinx doesn't wear the costumes?
Jinx, he did. We tried the sweater on both of them.
Oh, okay.
And he did wear it.
Cool.
And, you know, it
Yeah.
was not his like favorite thing.
Oh,
But
okay.
I got him a cow costume last year, which I feel like is the most appropriate costume for him. So he might be a
Yes.
cow again this year. We'll
That's
see.
fair.
Mhm.
That's adorable.
Because Salem, I think it would be appropriate. Salem likes to go out and greet the trick or treaters when they come. And so I
Ah,
feel like he needs the sweater more than Jinx does.
yes. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that makes sense. Oh my gosh. That's so stinking cute.
I know. He's like my permanent Halloween decoration.
He in the void.
He is.
Oh my goodness. Sweet little babies.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I hate to rush in, but this is going to be an extremely long episode. So long, in fact, that we have cut the good news segment.
Indeed.
Because I did
Indeed.
not realize how massive. Well, that's a lie. I know how big in general this topic is, but I didn't realize how much information I was gonna have to provide. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Which is fine. That's okay. We'll come back to the good news next week
yeah,
and
yeah.
it'll be good.
So I apologize to anybody who really thrives on the good news. I'm sorry we don't have any. The good news is we're still here. So I mean, the good news
Yeah. The
is
good news is we are recording the 44th episode of this podcast for you. So,
that's right, which is also hard to believe.
I know.
We're headed to 50 so fast.
I know. It's going to be so good.
It will. Okay, so I say we disclaim and let's crack into this thing.
Aye, aye, Captain. All right. So, before we get started, we are not experts on anything. If you have come to this podcast to get any kind of advice, we are not the place to get that, as you know. But we are the place to learn about things that you may not have come across in your day-to-day life. So we encourage you to do your own research along with us and give us any feedback that you might have.
Perfect.
And with that, we're going to jump into the main topic and not the good news.
just weird and backwards. I'll also say that, like, previous to this episode, we've been running the solar series every other week, which has been great, and that did come to a close with the sunshine episode.
It did.
But I decided to keep us in space, and we might even do the opposite of this episode at some point, but that is also a big franchise. So today we're talking about Star Trek, the opposite of which I think is Star Wars. So at some point we're going to have to tackle that.
I
Um,
don't really, I, I'm going to say I am a Star Wars girly. I am not a Star
oh,
Trek person at all.
okay.
I've never really, like, I know of Star Trek and I've never seen any of the movies or the show or anything like that.
Yeah.
So you will be educating me today because I am
Yeah.
not quite.
That honestly, I'm not like I don't know a whole lot about it. Mine just stems from like the earlier movies with like Chris Pine in them. And then
Okay.
also when I was a kid, Papa was very into the show. I don't know
Ah,
specifically like which one he was watching, like which series it was necessarily.
sure.
He could probably speak on it better than I, but he's not here at the moment, so I can't ask. Um, but it was kind of more part of my childhood. He watched a little bit of Star Wars, but it was a lot of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think if I know anything,
Yeah. Yeah.
Star Wars and Star Trek are both like intergenerational franchises, right?
Yes.
So then I think Star Trek obviously was before Star Wars in a lot, like the show I believe
Sure.
started like in like way earlier or maybe around the same time. I don't really know.
I
But what
mean,
I'm
yeah.
saying is
Yeah.
that I think your Papa's generation
Right.
is probably more into Star Trek, whereas like my parents' generation
Star
is
Wars.
probably Star Wars because all those movies came out, like the first three Star Wars came out when they were, you
No,
know,
you're right.
middle school, teenage kind of vibe. So,
And then like the different movies, they had different breaks in between each franchise too. Like there were
yes.
different lulls of content as well, and we'll see that even in today's stuff. When we talk
Yep.
about the Star Trek pieces. So I think Star Wars was pretty similar as well. And a lot of the reboots and spin-offs and things came later too. So like that impacted even different like my generation. And
Yes, absolutely.
we'll see there's even stuff that's still kind of coming out almost. So
Yeah.
it spans a long time for both, which explains why they're so big.
Yes, I
you
would
know.
agree.
So it makes sense. So technically speaking, the journey for Star Trek does begin actually in 1964. So it is pretty far back in terms of the starting line. The start of the space journey came from a simple pitch by the name of Gene, or the guy's name is Gene Roddenberry, and he was originally an Air Force pilot in World War II. He then transitioned to be a civilian pilot and then a policeman in Los Angeles before deciding to pursue another passion that he had, unrelated to either of those jobs, television, which seems like a
Great.
one off.
I mean, you don't see very many career paths take that
Right.
route.
Right. It's very unique. It was at this time he had decided to pitch the idea for the series that he was calling Star Trek to Desilu, I guess, Studios.
Mm-hmm.
And this was with the draft for the show being quite different than pretty much anything else that was on the big screen at the time. For example, the lead ship was named SS Yorktown and was commanded by Captain Robert M. April, and the descendant of Spock, another character on the show, the only character who would eventually become a series regular, is described as being half Martian. And all of this obviously was taking place in space. Kind of unique.
Yeah. So, would it be fair to say that this show was the first one to dare put real people in space as like a casual, this is where we live type thing?
I would say so. And even technologically, which we'll talk about, was also very ahead of its I'll put this in quotations, ahead of its time technologically.
Okay,
So
got it.
yeah, it was a lot of firsts as an entrance show. He put particular emphasis on the concept of parallel worlds and, of course, planets that are similar to Earth that can be filmed, taking advantage of existing sets and locations, apparently rather than an economic concession than part of his vision. So well, I don't really know how that equates. It just basically, it's very unique in how it was set up.
Yeah.
The draft also includes the infamous nonsensical version of the Drake equation that Roddenberry fabricates to demonstrate how many alien civilizations are only waiting to be part of a TV drama, which I thought was funny.
That is funny.
And some of the script outlines in the document will later be made into Star Trek episodes, mostly with different titles, just like script provisionally titled Mr. Socrates that became the TOS Bread and Circuses, which we'll talk about what TOS stands for. It's like its own little
Cool.
pocket. It's almost like each section of this became its own. I don't even know what you would call it. They became their own franchise within a franchise. Like there's essentially people who only subscribe to certain eras of the show as canon and things like that.
Oh, I see. Okay, so
Yeah,
it's very divisive in the
correct.
way that they watch it, I guess.
Yes, exactly.
Interesting.
They only
Okay,
associate with certain time frames of the show.
I see. Okay.
So between 1964 and 1965, this is called the Cage era. The studio accepted Roddenberry's proposal, and sets in the model of the USS Enterprise, which is what the ship was actually named at the time, NCC 1701, are built with a pilot movie titled The Cage being shot and sold to one of the major networks. Jeffrey Hunter plays Captain Christopher Pike of the Enterprise, a convincingly strong yet little charismatic lead character who is subjected to illusions induced by the vastly advanced Telosians. And I'm so sorry to all the Star Trek fans. I will be butchering all of the names that I don't know
I
already.
think that was right. That
You think
seems
so?
right. Yeah.
Telosians.
Yeah.
And aside from the already legendary reproach of being too cerebral, there are two more things that the officials of NBC purportedly do not like about this pilot. Number one, the female first officer and the alien officer, namely Mr. Spock. So they didn't like those characters. It is
Stupid.
it's the 1960s, and what they said was they can neither put up with a woman in charge in a military ranked structure, nor with Spock's quote satanic look. That is what they said. We can't have a woman in charge, and we can't have a Martian.
No Martians for
No
us.
Martian.
No women and no Martians.
Can't do either of those. They're too advanced for the time.
Meanwhile, they have Clint Eastwood in the middle of the desert shooting at Native Americans,
Correct.
which is totally not PC anymore. Like, oh my God.
Totally fine, right? But they gave the blessing for the second pilot nonetheless for the first time in TV history. What this is great though. So Roddenberry was like, well, that's silly because I cast this very specifically. That was his pilot.
Yeah.
And decides to dispose of quote number one, which was just the female officer. But what they didn't know was that female officer was actually played by his future wife, Majel Barrett. So they decided to just dispose of quote number one, keep Spock. But what he did was later credited and cast his future wife, Majel, for the Cage, and instead concealed her as a nurse in the chapel. So he ended up keeping her in
I can't believe she married him. Rude.
So they just camouflaged
Come on,
her
girl.
so that they wouldn't know that she was still in the movie, despite the fact that, NBC was like, we can't have a female lead. They were like,
right.
Fine, but she'll still be in there. We just won't tell you.
Yeah.
It's just weird times. It was the 60s.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we move officially to 1965, which is titled Where No Man Has Gone Before. And
this one I think is the most famous.
Correct.
Of the, just based on the actors' names that I see here. This is what I associate when I see Star Trek. Anyway.
Good. Yeah, well, it should, because this was like what I think most of the fans consider like the official era for the most part.
Okay. Cool.
So William Shatner at the time was Captain Kirk, so he replaced Captain Pike. While Leonard,
for those who don't know, sorry to interrupt you.
No, you're fine. You're fine.
for those who don't know who William Shatner is, he did a bunch of those travel what is it? Travelocity commercials? Or what
Yes,
is it?
I think
Is that the
so.
brand? I
Or is
can't
it
remember.
true?
No, hotels.com.
Yeah,
Hotels.com.
yeah.
Anyway, he did some of those commercials. You'll recognize him from TV, just not from like a show that you know, just from those commercials. Anyway, go ahead.
Correct. That's the only way I recognize him.
Yeah, exactly.
And Leonard Nimoy reprises his role of Spock for the second pilot episode, which was titled Where No Man Has Gone Before. And that's kind of what made it very famous. Here, the crew of the Enterprise have to struggle against fellow crew members who have gained godlike powers. And this was a more action loaded installment of the show. Still, not everyone seemed to believe the time is right to have regular alien characters on a TV show, namely Spock and the associated aliens that were doing all of this to the crew.
Sure.
And because of this, for early leaflets, Spock's ears, which were originally pointed to make him look more Martian-like, and his eyebrows are retouched to rehumanize him. So they took the effect completely away.
Sure.
That totally keeps the story alive. Among several more points, Gene Roddenberry emphasizes one groundbreaking quality about Star Trek already in his first draft. The first such concept was strong central lead characters plus other continuing regular characters. So it's not like it was you know how like a show will introduce someone and then you never see them again or associate it ever in the timeline ever again?
Sure.
Unlike that, even if they aired for like maybe an episode, you would still see them in the space-time continuum to a point. When they would be introducing other elements of the show, you'd be like, oh my gosh, that's the person they spoke to in episode whatever. They're no longer a main highlight in this
Okay.
episode, but you still recognize and they're still associated with the
Yeah.
show. And you have the continuation of Spock and the captain reoccurring every episode.
So instead of it just being like one guest star spot, it's like
Correct.
reoccurring guest stars.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. And this was apparently very new. Captain Kirk, the determined lead with fine social skills, the latter not only relating to women. I don't really know what they meant by that. It's kind of a weird sentence. Will become possibly the most famous character of television series ever, yet Spock's role, always sincere and of course logical as an officer, will appear to many fans as the most intriguing, especially since he's torn between his human side and his Vulcan heritage, which if you're not a fan of the show, basically his mom was human, but his dad was Vulcan. And even in the movie, which I have seen with Chris Pine, Spock still struggles with that. And there's a big divide between his dad and his mom in their relationship, but he does, spoiler alert, come to some kind of resolution with him near the end, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh.
And they come to an understanding, but it's like that struggle between the duality of where you're from and where your parents are from, which I think a
Yeah,
lot of people can relate to in some degrees.
definitely.
But the two cannot yet be called complete, as the second pilot with Dr. McCoy contributing to conscience and compassion to the mix was still missing. So this was just something they were going to continue to build on as the show continued. From the pilots, so that was just the introduction, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's just getting your foot in the water, honestly.
And those are just the first 2 episodes.
That's it. Yeah. We don't even have a
Jeez.
series. We have nothing off the ground really that's been deployed out for regular viewing. This was just an intro. It's just still really in depth. The official start of what they consider the original series was aired on September 8th, 1966. The series itself would span from 1966 to 1969, and the actual first episode that aired on NBC was considered the 5th filmed episode and was titled The Man Trap. So it wasn't even like the first one ever. It was number 5 in the lineup. Interesting choice.
Interesting. Yeah.
The troika of lead characters is complete. You had Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. who was played by DeForest Kelley. I don't think we mentioned that previously, but
And
that's who that
Kirk and
actor was.
Spock are William Shatner and
Right.
Leonard Nimoy, right?
Correct. Yes. Yep, yep, yep. Their interaction is decisive in paving Star Trek's way to lasting success, and it is safe to say that aside from its visionary concept and witty storylines, Star Trek, like every other TV drama, which is what they considered it, boils down
Yeah.
to how its characters are written and played, of course. Among the other characters, Ahura, who was played at the time by Nichelle Nichols, and I loved her in the movie with Chris Pine. She was amazing.
Hmm.
She was a Black woman as a starship officer, epitomizes Roddenberry's vision of a diverse crew more than even Spock, because Spock was considered just a Martian, but now we're actually
Right.
introducing real like human diversity into the show.
Yeah.
Although at the
And in
time her
1966, this is a big deal.
revolutionary, truly.
Yeah.
But although her role was kept relatively small, they did still introduce her. And again, as a starship officer, you're re-putting in a female into a considered military leadership role to a point as well,
Hmm.
which is also huge
Hmm.
since they denied it originally.
Exactly.
Sulu, Chekhov, and Scotty would also inspire diversity as well, because they were all from different areas of the world, and
Hmm.
they were inspiring generations of engineers, and like, because that's the role that they played. They would engineer the ship and fix issues and things like that on the ship. So
Right.
now you're introducing cultures, different cultures into it as well.
The common phrase, beam me up, Scotty, would
Yes,
be the
huge.
appropriate phrase for this particular Scotty.
I think you nailed it. Literally nailed it.
Yeah.
Um, and to your point as well, the other piece that we talked about in the very beginning is the technological advancements. But again, I'm going to put that in quotations. Basically, what this series did was introduce props and ideas of what our computers, electronic libraries, how you would save material, collect data, communicate. All of these things had to be completely fabricated because they didn't currently exist in the real world to the degree that we know them today. Like,
Right.
this is huge. And of course, with the advent of the internet, more than 25 years after, you can see some of these things take shape at that time, 25 years after, that were portrayed in prop form on Star Trek. So the generational gap in terms of technology is huge, but this was also revolutionary for a show to introduce this kind of futuristic, again, quotations, futuristic look
Right.
in a modern show for the time. It's
Right. It
crazy.
was like the Jetsons came to life,
Yes,
basically.
it precisely. Yes, exactly. So just kind of wanted to put that in there. It's really amazing to think about the kind of props they had to come up with, and like the minds that came together to put that idea together. So after that, 1968 to 1977 is called syndication success. During its 3 original seasons, Star Trek is not blessed with high ratings. It was not well received, ironically. And it was actually on the verge of being canceled when a letter writing campaign led by Trek's most famous fan, Joe Trimble, convinced the network to grant it a 3rd season. So it was literally
Wow.
it's literally a fan who was like, no, please. um,
That's happened in real life before.
yes.
Um, because Brooklyn Nine-Nine, the sitcom with Andy
Yeah.
Samberg, was going to get canceled, but then I think Seth Meyers and
Mm-hmm.
John Mulaney, I think, organized a stink on Twitter
Yeah.
and they renewed it for like another season, or it got picked up by another network or something like that.
Which is just great, honest.
I
The power of the
agree.
fans. uh but with Star Trek now being shown in the death slot late on Friday, which is a death slot is just like nobody's they know nobody is staying up and watching
Right.
that or taking the
Yeah.
time, so it's just kind of airing when nobody's around. um it doesn't survive this final season, unfortunately. It is not before the syndication that the show becomes a nationwide and eventually worldwide success, and with an unprecedented lasting effect. In the 1970s, it seems that Star Trek is winning the more popularity the more time it has passed since its cancellation, and fan conventions become a huge success. Essentially, nostalgia is taking over because it's
It's
no longer
so
there.
funny
Yeah.
because we see that with like The
Mm-hmm.
Office now,
Reboots and
because
things.
and reboots and
Yep.
streaming has changed all that. Gilmore
Yeah.
Girls, like the whole
Mean
all of
Girls.
those shows.
It's just a
Yeah,
movie.
they came out so long ago,
Yeah.
which makes me feel old, but like, they came out so long ago and now everyone is like
Yeah,
loving it.
exactly. And that's essentially what happened. The enthusiasm culminates in another fan letter campaign urging NASA even to call its space shuttle prototype Enterprise because they're so upset.
Wow.
A Star Trek sequel becomes due, but it takes time for the TV stations and for Roddenberry himself to notice that it bears potential because it'd been canceled for quite a while at that point. It didn't even make
Yeah.
it to a final season. So, you know. Um, so what they decided to do, 1973 to 1974, it got an animated series, which had a lot of controversy, of course, because
Hmm.
people were expecting the nostalgia of the original series.
Sure, yeah.
Um, which I apologize. I never told you that TOS stands for the original series. So
Oh, got
you'll
it.
see. Yeah,
Okay.
sorry about that.
That makes better.
TOS, the original. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Um, and I'll say that because there's more acronyms to come, so I apologize for that too. Prior to returning with a live action format, they decided to go into the animated series, which is then abbreviated TAS.
Got it.
And they featured the voices of the original cast. So even though it wasn't in real life and it was all animation, the voice actors were still the same people, from what I understand.
That's really cool
Yeah, that was
because
smart.
now you would like assume that they would use AI or something like that to like recreate their voices,
Yeah,
but
these are real
no.
people.
But yeah, you can't do that in 1973.
You
So,
cannot. Many TAS episodes are admittedly mediocre, which is perfect for us
indeed,
because we get that.
we
The,
do.
the course of the stories are often bumpy and they rely too much on tricks to bring about a resolution. Overall, though, it did pay tribute to the idea of Star Trek, and it continued for seamlessly for a 5-year mission of TOS, or rather, extends to 5 full years. Some of the episodes are sequels to events in TOS. The episode TAS, The Counterclock Incident, even includes Captain Robert April from Roddenberry's original draft of Star Trek, which is cool. So they brought back the OG draft guy.
Nice.
Um, However, the arguably best installment by far in this animated series was called Yesteryear, which is a telling of the story of young Spock in a remarkably mature fashion.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
nice.
And TAS was not officially acknowledged as part of the Trek's canon for a really long time. Yesteryear, though, purportedly exempted this from the ban of it not being canon. So again, we're starting to get
Okay.
into like, well, you bringing in all these new series. This isn't part of TOS, you
Right. But
know?
based on what you just said, though, it
Right.
sounds like the fans
They're like,
like that
fine.
Spock has a backstory.
Right.
Yeah.
And you'll see this divide start to take shape really aggressively. 1977 to 1978 is titled Phase 2, which I think is interesting. Because technically I'd say it's kind of Phase 3, but that's fine.
Sure.
After a couple of fruitless efforts to bring Star Trek to the big screen, Gene Roddenberry has to be talking about a feature film as early as 1968 at the time. Paramount approaches the Star Trek creator to revive the TV series in 1977, and Roddenberry tries to gather as many of the former staff as possible for what he informally dubbed Star Trek Phase 2, which is where it comes from. Most of
Mhm.
the actors would be able and willing to reprise their roles, except for Leonard Nimoy as Spock, which is huge sag. New characters would be Commander Decker, Lieutenant Ilya, and the Vulcan Zon. I'm assuming XON is going to be Zon.
Yeah.
The latter obviously meant to replace Spock because he didn't want to come back.
Oh, so
Yeah,
sad.
it is sad. Several screenplays are available, and pre-production of sets and models is done when the officials come to the decision to ditch Phase 2 in favor of a big budget movie. So,
Wow.
which is credited to be the success story of Star Wars, which is probably why the fans are so
Wow.
divided.
That's tea right
Yeah,
there.
it is. That's movie tea.
That is piping hot tea.
But the pilot episode of the would-be TV series In Thy Image is what it was going to be called, is made into the first Trek feature film, Star Trek the Motion Picture, with Nimoy's participation, ironically. So he did come back
Oh, so
inevitably.
that's good. You got a movie
He did.
with the original Spock.
Correct. Yes.
That's good. Okay.
But it almost was completely flounced in general because of Star Wars.
Wow.
1979 to 1991, the TOS movie era. So ridiculed by some critics as a slow motion picture, the intelligently written movie The Motion Picture, 1979, which is what we just talked about, becomes a smashing success in theaters. Huge, because again, we're talking about competition in the water as Star Wars, which was also a different space-themed franchise that was coming.
Correct.
The second Trek film, Star Trek The Wrath of Khan in 1982, is made without direct involvement from Gene Roddenberry, and it is obviously governed by the premise of appealing to a broader audience, and it includes more action to the end. So you're trying to draw in the audience a bit more.
They're trying to copy Star Wars.
I would say so, because that's what was budding in terms of interest.
Right. No, exactly. And those 3 original Star Wars movies came out in the 80s at around that time.
So you've got a lot of direct competition.
Yeah.
But building upon the story of Khan, Noonien Singh from TOS Space Speed the Movie is definitely a tidbit for diehard Star Trek fans more than ever. Although Star Trek The Search of Spock 1984 and Star Trek The Voyage Home 1986 fall a bit short of the intensity of the duel between Kirk and Khan, the movie trilogy is still a fan favorite today. And on the big screen, the vastness of space becomes a stage for bigger emotions. However, until 2010, no Star Trek movie ever wins an Academy Award, not even in the purely technological categories, which is such a shame because it really was revolutionary for its time.
Yeah.
And with that, we're going to take a little bit of a break. I can't even talk. My brain is baked because that's a lot of information. And in the second half, we're going to explore the next generation.
Every week, you listen to the MCP host droll on and on about, quote, interesting topics. And yes, I did just use air quotes for that.
We are positive your listeners would come up with better topics than them, and so we are enlisting you to send them over so we can talk more about exciting things in the future episodes.
We highly encourage you to do yourself and other listeners a favor and start sending good topic ideas over to mediocrecontentpodcast@gmail.com.
We even give you permission to slide into their DMs over on Instagram at Mediocre Content Podcast and Twitter at Mediocre Squawks.
If you don't decide to send topics over, prepare yourself for continued intense mediocrity.
Though honestly, it will probably be mediocre either way. Thanks for trying, and good luck in the second half of this interesting podcast, air quotes still included.
Welcome back. We're still in space, but that's okay.
Yes.
So we're going to continue the deep dive because, like I said, it's intense and we still have quite a few pieces to go. So let's just run into the next generation, which was between 1987 and 1994. So we're now getting into the 90s, which is fantastic. We've made it from the 60s.
I know about that.
Yeah,
I've been there.
Yeah, I've been there a time or two. So this was considered political correctness, but in a positive sense, because it was prevailing as a theme in the 7 years of Star Trek, which is why Gene was such a big proponent of diversity and inclusion and really just making sure his cast was full of different concepts and ideas, because even outside of it being a Martian space alien kind of land, it was also human diversity that we were trying to focus on and really bring that to the table in a time where it was not really seen or supported, which is sad, but that's fine. This continued in the next generation, which is tagged TNG for obvious reasons. None of these are complicated acronyms at all. It is reflected in rather small details like the change of the title monologue, such as where no one has gone before. So like we talked about, the original was no man has gone before. That was adjusted to say one instead of man.
Nice.
And getting rid of the latent sexism that may lie in the word man of the time, in addition to something called a scant, which was a skirt plus a pant, which was a unisex garment worn occasionally by low-ranking male crew members in the first season. So, again, you're taking men and putting them in a position where they're essentially wearing a skirt with pants.
With pants.
With pants, a scant,
I like
if you
that.
will.
That's
Yeah.
fine. Yeah.
Or in the carpeted floor on Enterprise D, even in engineering, which makes it look like a luxury cruiser and not at all like a warship. Also, there are now families on the Enterprise, which is great. So
Cute.
it's getting more and more diverse. Strange life forms in TNG are regarded in the first place as a fascinating opportunity to expand knowledge rather than considering them as a potential threat. So, you know, when people are like, oh, the aliens are to come, we're going to have to fight them. In this case, it was, oh, we're expanding what we know and we can collaborate together and have all of these beautiful ideas, you know?
What a lovely plot.
I would say. But they were also dealing with a lot during that time when they were creating the show. And so some of the themes that were happening in real life kind of manifested themselves into the show as well. So
As they
happens,
do, art,
right.
you know.
Right. So, for example, the Federation's fragile relations with the Klingons during TOS, the original, are quite obviously molded on the ongoing Cold War between the USA and the Soviet Union. I don't know a whole lot about the relations itself, but sounds like there was less real fighting and more like tensions than anything between the two areas. So that's just, to your point, art, and it's just kind of how it happens.
Yeah.
However, tragically, October 24, 1991, Gene Roddenberry passes away at the age of 70. Having retreated from work sometime, he passed away from a terminal illness, but he was kind of retreating away at the time anyway. He did transition to his successor, Rick Berman, as the executive producer of TNG, and it was very smooth between the two. TNG garners no less than 15 Emmy Awards, which is huge considering the original series had 0. And is nominated for 55 in general. So to get 15 out of 55 is pretty dang good. More than 10 million viewers tune in during TNG's 4th and 5th seasons, making it the highest rated syndicated TV series. And this allows TNG to enter the mainstream of TV entertainment, whereas its sequels, now in competition with other sci-fi formats, reside in what is considered a geeky niche once again. So it rose to prominence, became really popular, and then sci-fi became its own genre with its own formats, and it kind of receded back into that kind of uniqueness in terms of preference. Which I would say is kind of the same for Star Wars. If I were going to reach that far, I would say that's similar.
Yeah, definitely.
1993 to 1999 is considered Deep Space Nine. 2 series are simultaneously on air for the very first time in Star Trek's history, when during the height of TNG's ratings, a team around era Stephen Bear and the late Michael Piller launches Deep Space Nine, or DS9. Star Trek becomes literally settled when it moves into a space station, and unfortunately this is the part reflected in the often too slowly paced episodes of the first season. But the potential of the Bajoran people, their faith, the wormhole, and the inevitable culture clashes between the various alien civilizations evolved in the series will pay in the following years. Even more than that, the characters around Benjamin Sisko, who was Avery Brooks, and his mixed bag of officers make even less interesting stories and enjoyable experience. So even though this was kind of going side by side with TNG, it was not nearly as compelling.
Okay.
It's essentially what it boils down to. They did have reoccurring guest casts with, often more important roles than the regular staff, and just overall fans commit themselves to an order not to miss any of the various story arcs, but in general, it was kind of too static as a series, whereas the previous one you're exploring space, different planets, different civilizations, different people, and in this you're kind of stuck on a space platform for like the entire season.
So it's exactly.
Yeah, not as
which
compelling.
Probably reduced the budget in terms of location scouting and everything, but still.
It's true. It's very true. Because you're also not having to be as inventive, because instead of coming up with an entire planet every couple of episodes, you're like still on the space station and you may have to come up with maybe one or two different races or cultures
and subplots and stuff.
Right. Yeah.
Very well, and now that there's like a whole families and a bunch of people on board, it's just more about cast as opposed to location.
Exactly. And I get that, but this is again where kind of the different arcs are converged on the fans, just something else.
Totally.
1995 to 2001 Voyager carries on where TNG left off, but the sequel takes place in an uncharted region of space on Starfleet ships stranded in the Delta Quadrant, 70,000 light years away from Earth, that attempts to find a way home. So that's the whole plot of the story. This is just as DS9 proves that Star Trek can work without a starship, because again, they're based on a space station. Voyager can do without the familiar setting of the Alpha Quadrant. So it's completely new, uncharted, new exploration. One aspect of the show's premise is that the crew, which consists of Starfleet and former Maquis rebels, is forced to unite under the leadership of Captain Catherine Janeway, Kate Mulgrew, the actress, the first woman to command a Trek starship in a permanent role, so one that wasn't just like
nice,
you like casted and then left to dry away.
Yeah.
The ship also suffers from a permanent shortage of energy, and both problems fade away very quickly by the second season. The conflict against second-rate villains like the Vidians and the Kazon is given more exposure, but the show really thrives on its own character-focused thrillers in the struggle with Dreadnought against a machine she created herself, as well as the discussion of ethical dilemmas like VOY Truvix, especially if the outcomes remain controversial. All of those different political, religious pieces that are also continuitous with the times, and even Jean's personal preferences, because Jean was very much like, I don't really subscribe to anything specific. I just want peace and fun. And that theme, even after he passed away, is kind of continuing on through the series, which is great.
Nice.
1994 to 2002 are the TNG movies. The first movie with the TNG crew, Star Trek Generations, in 1994, is only a moderate success. In 1996, however, Star Trek First Contact hits first the internet with new speculation and bits of information nearly every day, and later the theaters, so kind of a backwards release almost. It is not only the first movie with Enterprise E, but also a Trek film of a new kind, made as a literally dark action thriller and not so much as what detractors like to call a space opera, such as the previous feature Star Trek Generations.
Mm-hmm.
Nonetheless, First Contact becomes a fan favorite, an achievement that the following Star Trek Insurrection 1998 and Star Trek Nemesis 2002 will not repeat, unfortunately, because they were far less well received. On the downside, the internet acts as an amplifier for all sorts of conflicts. So now you've got like the people who have preferences on the eras with one platform to fight each other on.
Right. So like the rise of fandoms on Reddit and Tumblr, etc.
Exactly. Yeah. So
super
you've got,
fun.
Sort of, I guess. I don't know. You got Voyager fans at odds with the Niners, which is DS9 for those that need the acronym again. And then there's also Star Trek versus Star Wars, of course, which we know the feud started because funding was sent more on the Star Wars fan at the time instead of Star Trek.
Right. Yeah.
And even if these are only small minorities, at some point, every fan inevitably runs into, the growth of Star Trek is really about. And it's just like, well, let's just have fun and talk about Star Trek. But there are definitely hardcore fans who have their set opinions.
Sure. Yeah. Just like with every fandom.
Yeah.
I mean, the Star Wars fans, have you met them? I mean, Lord,
Yeah, it's intense.
it's
And
crazy.
it's
crazy
down to the
pants.
color of your saber, really.
Oh my gosh. I
It's
know.
true.
It's like it's that TikTok audio where it's like, I want to go to war. I want a lightsaber.
Yes,
It's like that.
exactly. It's exactly that. 2001 to 2005 is the Enterprise, and since its initial announcement, Enterprise, the Star Trek prequel series, is confronted with reproaches from fans of not adhering to established continuity. So this is where the fans are saying that the series is starting to take a turn away from what they know to be the true Trek era of
Gospel.
time. Right, exactly. When the first pictures of Akira Prize NX-01 are published, observably no effort has been made to create a truly original of the 22nd century. For many fans, this, among other gripes, is a reason to disapprove of the show altogether before it even went on air, which is hugely bad for the show.
Incredibly bad.
Certainly some of the apprehension turns out to be premature when the pilot episode ENT Broken Bow presents itself as a great drama despite some flaws, while Enterprise is still struggling in the following to develop a certain distinctive feel of the 22nd century with respect to the 24th century Trek. It matures to a wonderful season in its own right, and that's a pretty good comeback.
Yes.
2005 to 2009, Trekless Time. This is a lull, unfortunately. So, after Enterprise has come to an end in May 2005, it is also the first time in 18 years without new Trek episodes. In a last attempt to avert the Trekless Time, a fan campaign is again launched to keep the air on show. It's Save Enterprise. I almost butchered that because I didn't realize they were two words. SaveEnterprise.com raised funds for the show, even receiving a commitment purportedly from aerospace industrials to
Wow.
I know, to donate as much as $3 million for Enterprise to continue. Unfortunately, this was all in vain because Paramount said, absolutely not. We are not interested in doing
We're
that.
not falling for that again, you guys.
And in April 2006, Paramount announces that J.J. Abrams, co-creator of Lost, will produce a yet untitled 11th Star Trek feature film. So they're like, we're not doing the show. Enterprise is not continuing, but we will give you a movie. That's fine. Take
Yeah,
this.
and J.J. Abrams goes on to do Star Wars movies, Marvel movies, like the whole nine.
Exactly. This film is initially said to be a prequel with new actors playing the TOS crew, but Leonard Nimoy, as opposed to William Shatner, appears in his old role. And Abrams makes it clear that his movie is not primarily aimed at longtime fans, and it's just essentially a pacification, unfortunately. Which
rough.
Yeah, that really sucks.
The whole Star Trek,
the whole thing.
Star Trek fandom when they realize that they're just being pacified.
Yeah. Right. Sad. So that brings us to the Abrams movies, and these are between 2009 and 2017. So we're actually getting closer. We're now in the 2000s, and this is where things speed up, and there's not as much to really talk about because we're entering the modern current era for Star Trek.
Yes.
Star Trek as the new movie is simply titled Star Trek. It is completed in summer 2008, but the release date was postponed from Christmas 2008 to May 2009. And this is in November 2008 because it became clear that Star Trek is set in a persistent parallel timeline, effectively rebooting the whole franchise. The second film of the series, Star Trek Into Darkness in 2013, is just as exciting, both of which I actually really enjoyed watching. So if you haven't seen either of them, I do think it's really good, even if you're not a diehard Trek fan. The production and release of the next movie, Star Trek Beyond, is overshadowed by the deaths of actors Leonard Nimoy 2015 and Anton Yelchin in 2016, which is just kind of sad. And Beyond is praised for critics by bringing back some of the old spirit, but rather in the character interactions than in the stories. So yeah.
I'm so sorry. If you scroll down to our Word document, Jinx has made some of his edits.
Oh my God. Bro, pop off. He's so good at
He's
this.
currently on his back on my keyboard right now. So I'm just
It's fine.
I can't do anything.
I can
with
scroll
this.
down. It's chill. I'll figure it
Okay.
out.
I'm so sorry.
Don't
Oh
apologize.
God.
He just wanted to be part of the chat, and that's fine.
As per usual.
So 2017 to 2024 is called Discovery. In November 2015, CBS announces the launch of a then still unnamed Star Trek TV series. Many fans are disappointed that the new show Discovery will not air on the network, but on the newly created CBS All Access pay channel in the USA and on Netflix in the most of the rest of the world. So USA got CBS, the rest of the world got Netflix.
Nice.
Everybody was upset, of course.
Everybody was upset.
They were. The production history of Discovery is also bumpy. The premiere date was moved multiple times, and turns out that the series creator, Brian Fuller, left the production after disagreements with the studio, which wasn't good.
No.
The series in general is also controversial already before it even goes on air September 2017, and is subsequently earning an additional bad reputation because of its ill-tempered characters, overall bringing negativity and illogical storylines. So not great. We're now even closer to current times. In 2020 to 2023, Picard first airs on January 30th, 2020 on CBS All Access. To the chagrin of many international fans, the international distribution of this series is on Amazon Prime and not on Netflix like Discovery. So they did a full 180. Now you can't even get it on the original platform it was offered on.
Interesting.
Many fans dislike the darkness of the sets and the total lack of progress in the first couple of episodes, but the most substantial point is that the narrative shift in the last two episodes to a more or less collapsing arc of suspense that's been built, which is just also sad. It's not going good. 2020, Lower Decks is the first official animated Star Trek series since 1974, and the first Star Trek-based comedy show. Its season 1 goes on air August 6, 2020 in the USA and in Canada. Fans in other countries are initially locked out because no international distributor is found. However, it did originally end up on its way to Amazon Prime for those that were international, and Lower Deck presents itself as a comedy grounded on Star Trek rather than a parody of the franchise. And creator Mike McMahon, which I can't say very well. Yes, Blair's got it.
McMahon. Mm-hmm.
Even states that the series is canon, though if you asked many fans, I'm not 100% sure that they would agree or not. 2021, Prodigy. Prodigy is a second animated series that launched October 28, 2021 on Paramount Plus, which was formerly CBS All Access, so it's still technically the same. They just transitioned network names.
Oh, nice. I didn't know that.
Right? It is the first Trek series created with 3D computer animation. What was the other one? There was another thing that I said.
Astronomers? No, astronomers. Yeah.
I'm so good at the space words. Prodigy is aimed at a younger audience, however, and in June 2023, Paramount Plus announced, so like this year, that Prodigy is not only canceled, but the series will be removed from the service on short notice.
Yikes.
I know the already produced second season is essentially going to be sold, and the whole fan base is upset that it was completely, destroyed and dismembered. It's sad. In the 2022 Strange New Worlds and Season 2 of Discovery, Captain Pike and Spock quickly become more popular characters than the regular crew of the USS Discovery. The studio recognizes the potential and announces a spin-off series titled Strange New Worlds, or SNW, the fifth Star Trek series since 2017. It premiered May 5, 2022 on Paramount Plus, and the series is well received in the fan community and clearly much better than Discovery, although it inherits the burden of the visual reboot and the overblown technology and history established in DIS. One reason for the popularity of the show is that the producers keep their promise and bring back the classic episodic format. And Strange New Worlds, unlike Discovery or Picard, is not plagued by dragged out storylines and by episodes that feel like nothing is going on. So filler episodes, as we like to call them. You never want too many of those. The series the series comes with a fresh story every week while not neglecting the character development as well. And that kind of brings us to the end of what I have for today. So, I'd be interested to know who is, Star Trek versus Star Wars, but also, do you subscribe to all the areas of Star Trek that were? What are we feeling? What's the current modern vibe in 2023 about this? Because it's still happening.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
It's still a popular series. There's still series out there that are rebooted and whatever you want to call it.
Well, I mean, and we are in the era of reboots, right? So
We are. Yep.
It's a vibe. But
it is.
I don't know. It just depends. I feel like people are getting sick of the reboots though.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
I think you just have to do them well. It's almost like when movies were coming out with sequels, even with Disney and stuff. They were like, "Oh, the original's always better than the sequel." But I think
it's true.
I think they try really hard to keep the stories alive and like not let the franchise die. And I think even if it's not done well, the fact that they're doing their best to keep it says something. They're trying.
I also think so. We recently saw the new Haunted Mansion movie.
Oh, okay.
With Owen Wilson and Tiffany Haddish. And it was, have you seen the Eddie Murphy one?
I love that one. Yes.
It's very good. This one I think is a little bit more true to the ride. And it was really good. It's good. Funny. It's a little spooky, but like still fun and good. And I thought it was almost better than the Eddie Murphy one because in the Eddie Murphy one, he kind of like carries the whole movie, He
does. He really does.
And it's not bad, but it's
different.
This one I think is better. Yeah.
Well, and I think there's something to be said for that. I will also say there is something about seeing something for the first time that you truly enjoy that provides nostalgia that you might not get back, And so you just continue like, I know one movie for me that I continuously watch because of nostalgia is Ever After. And that's just like my childhood. Yeah. It's just my childhood.
It's a good one.
And so if I could go back and rewatch it for the first time and get that feeling again, I 100% would. And I think sometimes that's what happens to fans with TV series is each season, it's like you'll never have the nostalgia of that first episode 1, season 1 experience again.
Exactly.
And so that's sometimes hard to transition away from.
Yeah, I would agree.
But we want to know, truly.
Yeah. We absolutely want to know what you guys think, good or bad. We're here for you. We have no we have no stake in the Star Trek universe.
We do not.
We're open to all opinions, honestly.
Yes, exactly.
With that, feel free to send us an email with any questions, comments, or concerns. Or topic suggestions. Jinx, I can't read if you're in front of the screen.
He wants to do the outro, Blair.
You know what? He's been this whole second half. He's just been over here, like rubbing his head against the microphone and making his own outline and like all these things.
Mediocre content.
The next episode's going to be Jinx writing the episode. All right.
Probably better than what we do.
Anyway, comments, questions, concerns at mediocre content podcast at gmail.com. Follow us on Instagram or TikTok at mediocrecontent.com. We visit us live every other Thursday on Twitch at 3 p.m. PST, 6 p.m. EST, or 11 p.m. BST at Mediocre Content Podcast. And don't forget to rate us 5 stars because we deserve it. And
okay.
Or at least our cats deserve it. Our cats deserve it.
Do it for the cats. The cats are the real entertainment. And honestly, even on our lives, the cats are the true entertainment.
Exactly. Yeah. So 5 stars. And we'll see you next week with some other topic.
Sounds good.
Cheers.
Cheers.